And I don't know if you know this or if our guests know this, but the Prime Minister is actually just a block away right now.
We should invite him over. We have a great chat.
Some great ideas he might be able to borrow.
That's right.
But, Pierre, your event...
Upon hearing that Mark Carney was only a block away, Pierre Poilievre's first reaction is to invite Mark Carney in for a debate and discussion, laying bare the difference between the two men. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Pierre Poilievre was the keynote speaker recently at an organization called the Economic Club of Canada, which are the people that are struggling to hold on to their industry inside of Canada, despite all of the efforts of the Liberal government to amalgamate all of our industry into the same four bureaucratic departments that they have the absolute control of, somehow thinking in their mind that they have the right to take over all the business and all the industry in this country. Now, that's not what this video is about. And I'm not even really going to be talking much about Pierre Poilievre's policies. I want to highlight some of the things that Pierre Poilievre said within the first 5 minutes of this interview and how they expose the primary differences between the leader of the Conservative Party and the leader of the Liberal Party. And in fact, many of the leadership of the entire left wing of the country. The answers that came off of his tongue, unscripted, without any, cue cards or any teleprompters to guide him through the answer. Pierre Poilievre lets the country know the kind of situation that he's in, the kind of personality that he has. And I believe that Canadians need to hear it and see it for the reality that it is. And that, I believe, exposes Pierre Poilievre to just be of the common thinker, the man of the people, because he is of the people. He's not an elitist. He's not a globalist. He doesn't come from money. He didn't even marry into money. Let's get into this. For those of you that might not understand the format of these kinds of things, Pierre Poilievre had already in this interview spoke for about a half an hour. Then after he says his keynote speech, he sits down with an interview with whoever's the MC of the particular event, or what they often will refer to as the fireside chat. This is though there's no fire sitting there, obviously, this is what they indicate, which is just the interview discussion. The quote that I opened with, you'll hear again, and then the rest of it, but it shows quite a bit of the situation on the ground, which many people in the center or on the right are not getting a clear picture of, due to the censorship and the control of our airwaves by the four corporations of the mainstream media.
And I don't know if you know this or if our guests know this, but the Prime Minister is actually just a block away right now.
We should invite him over. We have a great chat.
Some great ideas he might be able to borrow.
That's right.
But, Pierre, your event sold out faster and with more tickets. So for the economists in the room, I guess that's demand and the market has spoken. So Absolutely. Maybe it's right here.
God bless free enterprise.
Well, there were a couple of very funny things there because you heard the MC say some ideas he could borrow, right? Because Mark Carney's entire platform is ripped directly, plagiarized from Pierre Poilievre, and everyone knows it, even though the Liberal propaganda arm doesn't want to admit it. But Pierre Poilievre, taking it in stride, just says, yeah, it's open source. Because open source indicating, for software that you can take other people's code. Oh, that was a great dig. So in one sentence, he invites him over for a discussion. Pierre Poilievre invites over Mark Carney for a discussion or a debate, which would be great if we could get the mainstream media out of the way and we could get Mark Carney to agree to have this debate with Pierre Poilievre, though I doubt that he would. And then, of course, the greatest part of the entire sentence, God bless free enterprise, which is the only solution to all of our economic woes. There's no economic prosperity in Marxism. You cannot tax yourself into prosperity. You cannot target business and expect for that to evolve into prosperity. You cannot limit the amount of houses being built and expect for all of a sudden there to be a great amount of houses at an affordable rate. And clearly that's what's required to solve at least one of the issues in this country. Pierre Poilievre, though, doesn't seem to be... he seemed to have taken that all in stride and taken it in very good order for a person who's A, supposed to be in real concern for his leadership, and B, is supposed to be this angry fella, right? So I just think that we need to look at it when the mainstream media doesn't have control over the message. This next one is going to upset a lot of people on the left who have this image of Pierre Poilievre that they want to accept as the truth without ever actually looking beyond the message or the headline that they're being sold by people whose best interest is served, having individuals think the worst of anybody but Pierre Poilievre in this particular instance.
So Pierre, we're going to talk a little bit about policy, about politics and personal, but I want to start a little bit on personal. You and I are friends, but a lot of people in the audience are just still getting to know you. Your most important job outside of being leader of the opposition is as a committed father to Valentina and Cruz and a husband to the wonderful Anna. So my first question, you and Anna have been together for many years through campaigns, kids, and in the public eye. What has she taught you most through all of it?
Stay grounded. Definitely stay grounded. She comes from very humble beginnings. Obviously, she came as a refugee fleeing Venezuela, and they had to start from scratch. She was raised in a working class neighborhood in East End, Montreal, a tiny basement apartment, and she left home at 17, moved to Ottawa, worked at Best Buy, got a job in the West End of town selling electronics in English, even though she didn't speak English at the time. And that taught her how to solve problems and get things done. But she also reminds me that, no matter how high and mighty we in politics might think we are, it's the strivers like her family that we're working for. And our mission is to unlock their potential and give them the best possible lives. So she keeps me grounded and makes sure that the ego is always in check. And I think that's a healthy thing for any politician.
That's good to hear. She sounds like she'd be a great campaign manager.
She's not she manages much more complicated operations, like getting the kids out the door in the morning and she produces an incredible magazine. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have.
A beautiful magazine, and she's a great writer, and she's founded her own businesses. So very talented, brilliant young woman.
Yeah, before I launch into what's clearly, Pierre Poilievre's admiration for his wife, I'd just like to say a couple of things about what he said. First of all, she came here, lived in a basement apartment as a small child, I'm sure. 17-year-old, comes out of the East End of Montreal. Anybody who's been to Quebec knows. But if you haven't, let me assure you that there's not a lot of English being spoken, even today, in the East End of Montreal. It's a very French area. So to go into the west side of Ottawa, where they speak a lot of English and not that much French, or if they do speak French, it's only at work, not in the house. That seems like a fairly difficult thing to overcome. So here we know right out of the gate that she's trilingual. We know that she's a refugee. We further know that she's Latina. I mean, the idea that he doesn't have an understanding of what is going on with most of the country is a little bit absurd. And I just want to highlight a couple of things let's listen to him say a couple of these things again about his wife.
She comes from very humble beginnings. Obviously, she came as a refugee fleeing Venezuela, and they had to start from scratch. She was raised in a working class neighborhood in East End, Montreal, a tiny basement apartment, and she left home at 17. And that taught her how to solve problems and get things done. But she also reminds me that, no matter how high and mighty we in politics might think we are, it's the strivers like her family that we're working for. And she's a great writer, and she's founded her own businesses. So very talented, brilliant young woman.
Whoa, Mr. Poilievre, I need you to tone down all the misogyny that you're accused of. Just take it easy there. Let's not have too much of it on display when you talk clearly with admiration and love for your wife. And like I told you at the beginning, this section of the interview is going to upset a lot of people. They're mostly on the left-hand side of the aisle, and they want to believe that Pierre Poilievre is not only has a distaste for women, but he also has a distaste for immigration, and he has a distaste for all of these things, which are simply not true. So let's look just briefly at the profile of Pierre Poilievre. In just this snapshot, we know that he was adopted. So there's if you've ever met anybody who's adopted, they have a certain they always feel like they're a little bit behind the, so there's always that level of concern that they have running through the back of their mind. And he clearly has overcome that. His wife came here as an immigrant, lived in a basement apartment, got a job at 17 years old, obviously did her best to strive and become something strong. But if we were to take this person and ask him if he understands the plight of the person who just got here from Punjab, or who just got here from Venezuela, who just got here from Ukraine, who just got here from Florida, who just got here from Mexico, who just got here from any country you can name, who do you believe is going to have a greater comprehension of what they're going through? Is it Pierre Poilievre and his wife who keeps him grounded? Or is it Mark Carney, who went to Harvard on a scholarship, then went to England, married into some very wealthy family, hobnobbed and rubbed shoulders with some of the elites on the entire planet Earth? Do you feel that Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney understands you better? If you are of the blue collar, or if you are of the struggle, who do you believe understands what you're going through better? Do you believe that Mark Carney has a clue about what it takes to get your life stable in this country? Or do you believe that Pierre Poilievre would be a greater person to, or closer to understanding what you're going through? Pierre Poilievre, who grew up in a blue-collar family, or Mark Carney, who has strived his entire life to live in the lap of luxury and be an elitist and a globalist? And this is important when we ask ourselves, who's going to be better to solve the housing crisis? Who's going to be better to understand why you don't need to be paying as many taxes, why you shouldn't be paying as many taxes, why your ability to pay for rent should be controllable? Which one of these leaders is going to understand you better? Which one of these leaders is going to is going to be able to make legislation and talk to the business world and everything in a way that's going to translate into prosperity for you, because he is going to know it from your side of the question. He's going to understand it from the blue collar side. He's going to understand it from the refugee side. He's going to understand it from the bulk of the country. Like I said, this is most of the people that we're talking about. Mark Carney rubs shoulders with the 0.01%. Pierre Poilievre comes from the 99%. And I believe that when we're looking for a leader, leave aside the labels of conservative versus liberal versus NDP versus, just leave all that aside and just ask yourself, based on this kind of information, which person do you believe can put themselves in your shoes and therefore translate that into laws and legislation and regulations that are going to improve your life? I know what I think, but I want you to think for your own position, because I believe that people should think their way through their vote instead of just reacting and responding to whatever angry headline the CBC is permitted to blast all over the internet, while the very same legislation keeps voices like mine and headlines from any alternative newsprint very, very far down in the algorithm.
Wonderful. And you said before that everything you do is about giving your kids and their generation the shot at the same opportunities that you had. What do you think has changed most for young families in Canada?
I just think the things that we used to take for granted are now out of reach, and the basic ambitions, like starting a family, owning a house, having nutritious food every night, those are things that if you had a job at a university, you knew you would be able to do. But in the last 10 years, we've come to a place where it is literally impossible for youth to own homes in our biggest centers, and increasingly even in our small towns. And that is totally unnecessary. I call it the promise of Canada. It's better than the American dream. American dream is kind of, you wake up from a dream, but a promise is something that is honored if you do your part of the bargain. Our youth today are doing more than their part of the bargain. They are working longer than probably any generation before them since the Second World War to get less and less.
I think that we can take a lot away from that small statement. Now, we know that the prices are going up in small towns. We know that the average size of a condominium on the new build, anything built since 2018, is 500 square feet. They want $1.2 million, and they are offering you 500 square feet. If you believe that there's privacy inside of that 500 square feet, then, I just want you to take a real hard look at how you imagine they're cramming that kind of stuff into a space without having paper-thin walls and without having noise passing right through all of that. And they want millions of dollars for these kinds of tiny little cubicles. The average between what was built before that and the average between what was built after 2018 is 50%. So if it was around 1,100, it's now like 500 square feet. And there's reasons that they put them into the building, and I could explain it to you, but I'm not going to explain it to you in this video. Also, we need to see that these corporations are being permitted to buy up whole tracts of land, big sections of small towns, getting a monopoly. Now, we have very strict laws in this country against monopolies. Monopolies are the reason that Bell was broken up. Bell, the telephone company, in my lifetime, has been broken down into many regions. It used to be one gigantic, used to be the only phone company in the continent, but the monopoly is no good. Having a monopoly on the housing is no good. Having a monopoly on having like a stranglehold on the banks so that you can stop people from building new homes, so that you can tell them that the legislation of environment and the housing paperwork that has to pass through the mayor, because all of these houses and all of this building has to pass through the municipality, and having that slowed down because the municipality is getting a bonus from the Ottawa is something that we cannot permit. And I believe that Pierre Poilievre is on the right track when he talks about housing and food as being the two of the primary concerns. I mean, I always hear the left talk about how the people that are the poorest are always the ones that are so hard done by, and that they have no food and they don't have good houses. How come it is that they permit the government in this country to create a stranglehold on the housing, and they allow them to drive the cost of food up through the roof? How can they tell themselves that they care about what they're supposed to be one of their core beliefs, and permit the government that they claim to be supportive of the Marxist ideology to stranglehold all of the housing and to force people to spend millions of hard-earned dollars? I mean, $1 million for 500 square feet. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. No property, no land, nothing. You have to listen to every time somebody turns on their washing machine, Lord helps if it's gone squeaky. But nobody seems to want to look at the reality except for Pierre Poilievre. And then, of course, the mainstream media runs interference between the truth and the message that the Liberal government is trying to craft, the message that is not rooted in reality. It's just simply a fantasy. It's a dream, something that we all need to wake up from. The promise of Canada, I get it. I see what he's saying. We promise to give you property. We promise to give you good food at an inexpensive price. That doesn't mean that we promise you all of these other things, but you can have the core, the base, the bottom of the rung. Because if you ask anybody in psychology, they will tell you the two primary things that a person needs to have mental stability. If you take a child that you want them to be mentally stable, you have to give them a good house, a good home, and you have to give them good food. And that is the kind of thing that they put in their little needs ladder. And there's all kinds of different models that are called, like depending on the name, there's a pyramid, there's a ladder. What's important to this conversation is that the bottom rung is always the same. House, food, and these are the kinds of things that build a strong foundation for a healthy mind. Now you got people coming here across the world who might be escaping poverty. Absolutely. I don't know what their situation is, but I know that they didn't tell themselves that they went through all of that trouble to come to Canada and have the exact same problem. They didn't tell themselves that they were going to come to Canada and end up living 20 deep in a tiny little basement apartment. They could have done that back in whatever country they came from. They came here for something better. They came here for a promise of something better. And the federal government, the Liberal government, and the far left collectively do not seem to care about what happens once they get here. They only seem to be obsessed with having them come across the border so that they can thumb their nose at people who think that there should be law and order, thumb their nose at people who think there should be control and understanding, and taking it in slowly and surely so that everybody's standard of living is maintained at a certain level, at a certain degree. Which, of course, I come back to, meaning a good house and a good food, inexpensive food. I believe that what we can see here showcased from Pierre Poilievre, which was inside of the very few minutes of the question and answer period with this gentleman across from him, the understanding of what people are going through and some idea of how to solve the problem. I get it. The corporations are in the way. The bankers are in the way. There's a lot of things in the way. But we're not going to be able to start getting them out of the way if we don't start to put the pressure on our government that it's enough is enough is enough. We have waited, and we have waited. And the Liberal government's dream that they're selling us is nowhere near fruition. And it is not going to come from this last budget. It's not going to happen under their watch. It's not going to happen under their tutelage. It's not going to happen under their ideas. They do not understand what you're going through. They do not understand what it means to struggle. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.